Okay, hello everyone. So I'm going to take you through Microsoft Access today. Access is one of those pieces of software that I find most people who have some experience with Microsoft Office don't usually have very much experience with this one. So I'll take you through all the things you potentially need to know for the functional skills exam. So what Microsoft Access is a piece of database software. It is very useful actually, but isn't often very used in a lot of business environments. So what you may find is that a lot of people actually use Excel spreadsheets to do things that really should be being done by Microsoft Access. So today I'll show you this, and I'll show you kind of some of the benefits of that by extension of showing you what you need to know for the exam. So we open Microsoft Access itself, and we're going to want to create a blank desktop database. As you can see, it's selected here. So we'll create that. One of the big differences between Access and all the other Microsoft products is with Access you can you instantly create a file that is saved. So everything you do, every time you insert a new piece of data, there is a kind of auto save on it. So if it crashes, if you lose it after working on it for 3 hours, chances are you're only probably going to use the last little thing that you was working on. Rather than with, say, Microsoft Word, you could sit and write for 3 hours and forget to save it, and if it crashes and you don't have a recovery, you've lost that data. So there are some advantages to Access in that respect. So when you first launches the program and say opens our database, you'll notice we've got pretty much nothing here. We've got a lot of options at our top for our database tools. We've got a table here with nothing in it, and we've got some what they call objects down the side here. So you can see just table 1. So at the moment this is our database. There's nothing in it, of course, it's completely blank. So you can manually input into your database and create a database using this table, just like an Excel sheet, as you'll see. But you're not going to have to do that for the exam because it's quite time consuming sitting there putting rows of meaningless data in. So rather than doing that, they're going to give you a file that you can import. So there's 3 steps that I need to show you as part of this tutorial. The first thing is importing the data, and that's going to be using a external file that's been sent from the exam to load into the database software here on Access. Setting that up so it loads in correctly and formats and looks correctly when it loads into the database and reads it properly. After that, we need to create something called a query, which I'll explain all about when we get to the next part. And then after that, we need to do a report on that query. So you have to remember there's 3 key things that we need to be able to do, which is import and set up, run queries, and create reports. Okay, so step 1 of those is to import the data. So to do that, you need to go to External Data menu at the top here, and it's split into 2 little sub-menus. One says Import and Link, one says Export. Okay, so Export, of course, is for taking your database out of Access, and importing is for bringing data into your database. We're only going to use the import. You don't need to use the export function at all for the functional skills exam. So you can see you can load in different types of files. You can load in other Excel files because it translates. It can load in other Access databases. You also may get text files or XML files. Now in the exam, the chances are they'll probably give you a text file or an XML file. If it ends in .txt, it's a text file, and .xml, it's an XML file. Probably most likely to be a text file. So that's the one you want to click on in the exam most likely. But I'm going to do it with an Excel file, but the only difference between the two is going to be which button I choose. So because I'm loading Excel, I want an Excel file. Because you'll want text file, you'll select text file. Okay, so click on Excel to import. We want to find the external data now. So the first thing we need to do is to actually select the source destination of the data that we want to import. So go to Browse and find your data. Okay, so I've got the file here that you should have access to, import file for Access. Okay, so load that, make sure that the URL is displayed on it, and we want to import the source data into a new table in the database. Okay, so you're going to end up, you've got table 1 there with nothing in it. We're going to create a new table and we're going to import it into there. Okay, so say OK, and the first thing it'll do is it's going to read that file and it'll give you a kind of rough what it thinks is the right sort of format and layout for your data. Now it is because it's got, I can see it's put it into columns and it's got all the data that I have. Nothing's looking weird, there's no strange characters. If you see strange looking characters or lots of repeating characters that shouldn't, don't fit into the middle of words, go back and try and re-choose a different file format, because that might be a problem there. But this one looks absolutely fine because I know I've loaded it from an Excel file and it seems to be going in. So we're happy with that, so we can go to next. Okay, the next page on this wizard will ask you whether you have the first row is column headings or not. Now, on a lot of Excel files, it will be intelligent enough to realise that it probably is, and you probably put some formatting on like bold or underline or something to signify their titles anyway, so it'll probably find it. If it doesn't, and it normally won't do on a text file because it doesn't have that formatting information, it might be deselected and it will display your titles as record number 1 in the database. Now, record number 1 doesn't want to be the titles. Record number 1 wants to be, in this case it's all mobile phones, so wants to be the first mobile phone in the database. So we want to click it has column headings to put it as column headings, and then record 1 can be the first phone. Okay, so just check that. Say sometimes it might be on, sometimes it might not. It just depends on whether it's recognised it or not. Okay, so we want to click on to next, and then we have, this is a very important part that a lot of people do skip over quite quickly, so I just want to show you why it's important now, because you will see as part later. So these are here all your individual fields, so your data field. So this one relates to phone name, this one relates to price, rating, stock, and stock, etc., etc. And we want to limit it so you can only put certain types of data into each column, because only certain types of information are useful. Now, in the phone name column, obviously the information we've got is phone names, and the type of, so what we need to do is we need to say, well, people can put pretty much anything they like in there because the phone name could be anything. So for that we have down here on data type a selection of different options, and the default one tends to be short text, and for something like a description, short text is perfect because it's a one-line piece of text with some information in it. It allows text, it allows numbers, that's fine. So for this one, short text is fine. For the second one, price, here these are all currencies, so it's all in pounds, of course. Now it says here data type double. Now double that's not what this is used for, so there is a more appropriate one which we can use, currency. So we'll select that as currency. Okay, and the next one is rating. So this is another numeric one, but it's not currency, it's a numeric field. But again, we don't want double in here. Now what you really want is one that says number, and you can probably see from this little list there isn't actually one that says number. The closest thing to number is the word integer, which kind of sort of means number. So what you need to do, you need to remember to select integer for this. Long integer if you're going to use lots of 0.1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 7, etc, etc. But we're only doing small numbers here, so we're going to select integer. But you'll see later that actually somebody who is designing this may have made a little bit of a mistake, because although number isn't an option here and only integer is, the word number is going to appear later where you think integer should. So just keep that in mind on that. Okay, so integer is what we want though for basic numeric fields. Now what that will do as well is when somebody goes to your database, if they try and put a new phone, say, into this database and put it in, and rather than writing a numeric rating of 1 to 10, they write good or very good or excellent or poor, it will say, no, that's the wrong type of data for this field, you can't do that. So what it helps do is it helps maintain the integrity of your database, basically. It stops other people accessing it, adding records on, and them not following the format that you want to follow it. And that could be a problem later on when you're wanting to run searches for certain things, and this is where queries will come in. So this one is selected as integer. These next ones as well, short text is absolutely fine for those as well. Okay. So we're happy with all those. Just make sure they're all set up. Short text, currency, integer, short text, short text. Go to next. The next screen will ask you about whether you want a primary access key basically or not in this. Now primary key is like a record number, so it can be useful. So if you had, for example, a patient database of people's names and you gave them all individual patient numbers, you might want a primary key. For something like this it might not be that useful, especially if you've only got 14 phones in a database. You might not necessarily need to number them because you're just going to refer to them as the name. So for this database in particular, I would say no, we don't need a primary key. When it comes to the exam, just follow the instructions. If it says add a primary key, then add one. If it says do not add a primary key, then don't add one. If it doesn't even mention it, then it shouldn't really matter either way whether you put one in or not. But I often choose to have no primary key because there usually isn't much need. The only other situation you may get is if you've already got a column that say had record number in, you could maybe select that column as your primary key, of course. But say in this case we don't need one. Okay, so on to next. That's all of our wizard completed. Okay, so we're happy with that. We don't need this selected. It doesn't need to be analysed because we've already seen the data looks fine. Click on finish. The last option we have for this is save import steps. Now that's great if you're going to do the same thing, say another 15 times. So you've got 15 other spreadsheets that have pretty much the same formatting and all need adding into the database. You can save the import steps and just repeat them, so you don't have to do that same process 15 times. But we're only going to do it once, and you will only have to do it once for the exam. So we'll just close that. Okay, and now what you'll notice in the all access objects column here is we've got sheet 1 and table 1. So let's double click and open sheet 1, and you can see we've got our data. It's loaded in. Some of the columns are a bit squashed, so just like you do with Access, if you put it as Excel, sorry, just put your arrow in between the columns until it looks like that. Double click and it will expand the column out to fit all the words in properly. Okay, so we've imported our data. Now what it's going to ask you to do in the exam, because you can't upload the Access file to their server and it work properly because you've moved the location of the file you've imported as well, what you need to do is you need to show them that you've just done that and you've set up your data correctly. To do that, there's two views you can switch behind. So what you're looking at the moment is called the front end, or the data sheet view. Okay, so this is kind of the front part of your database, what you're seeing. We can also look at the back end of it, or the design view as it's called, and that's kind of all the workings and the things that you've set up to make it work. So to skip between these two things, there's two buttons down in the right hand corner here. One's data sheet view, which is what we're currently on, one's design view. So click on design view and you can see it's changed here, and what you can see now is just your field names, so phone, name, price, rating, stock, rule 1 and 2, and the data types that you selected earlier. Now as you can see there's short text, currency, and oh look, there's number, like I mentioned. No, it doesn't say integer, and if you look in that list as well, there isn't even the option for integer, just number. So that that's set up. So what they're going to ask you to do at that point now is they're going to ask you to do a screenshot, okay, of this part of the database. So firstly then you're showing you know how to get to it, and then you're also showing that you actually properly set the data types up. You didn't just click import and then click finish on the wizard, okay, and you set it up properly following the instructions. So the screenshot there, you'll have to save that. Go back to your data sheet view, and it'll say you can must save the files. So yep, that's fine, save the table, no problem. Okay, so that's step 1 done. We're going to do step 2 now. Okay, so step 2 is probably is the most complicated bit, but you'll probably like step 3 because it's very straightforward once you've done step 2. So what we're going to want to create now is what's called a query. Now what a query is it's an interrogation of your database. So you're going to ask an automatic program to run, look at your database and just pull information out that you want based on your search parameters. Okay, so to do that we need to go to create at the top, and we want to go to query design, not query wizard. Okay, and the reason we want to use query design is that you need to know, I want to show you how to do all of this process so you understand how to build the query, because later on you're going to have to screenshot it as well and how you did it. So click on query design and you will get this dialog box open, and it's going to ask you which of your objects do you want to have included in this query, in this search. So if you had multiple sheets and multiple tables, then you could add as many as you wanted. For the purpose of this we only need one, so it is sheet 1 that we want to import. Okay, so there we go, we want sheet 1, add that in, and when you do you'll see that pops up in a little box, and anything that's in this grey box, and you can see potentially a very big grey box, can be included in your query. Okay, so we don't need to add anything else in, so just close that little window, and we know that these fields at the moment are going to be included in our query from that one sheet 1. Okay, so let's say for example the purpose of something like a query would be you need to pull out a records of all the phones that are rated higher than 6. Okay, you just want to see the phones that are rated higher than 6. You don't want to see any of the ones that aren't. So you need to create a query to do that, and the great thing is once you've created the query, as you add new items into your data sheet, into your database, they will automatically be updated and included in your query, so when you run it again it will include those into your search. So it's something that would be very useful if you're creating a monthly report, for example, on profits or anything like that. You could do that and it would run it automatically, update including all your information. With an Excel sheet you can do the same thing, but you have to write a formula and once then you've written the formula, you then need to amend the formula to include your new fields or new rows or new columns in that. So it requires a little bit more maintenance in terms of the actual process of finding it out. So we're going to create a query. So we're going to do it as rating of phones rated over 6. Okay, so you notice down here you've got a series of smaller columns. Now these are the fields we're going to include in our query. So what we want to say is we want to see all the phones. We want to see the rating, yeah? It's going to say from sheet 1. You have a choice of sorting it by ascending or descending. So let's, for example, choose ascending order. And then we have the box show. So if that box is ticked, we're going to see it. Okay, if you run it and unticked, you're not going to see that information. So make sure show is included. Okay, and then our criteria. This is where we have to use the correct syntax. But it's quite simple, really. It's using a greater than, a less than, or a equal to. Okay, so we want everything that is rated greater than 6. Okay, so there is a column below, row below for or and several. So what you could do is you could say everything that's rated above 6, or below 2, or you know, above 9, or and you can add a few different ones in, so you don't have to write any very difficult, complicated single expression argument to make it work. So that's our basic query. We want to see rating from sheet 1 in ascending order. We want to see it, and we want all we want to see is the phones that are rated greater than 6. It would be that way around, greater than 6. The other way is less than. Okay, so that's going to be a greater than 6. What happens though if we run it now is you're just going to see that information. So I'll just show you what I mean. So I click on run, and we've got a list of 7, 7, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 9, 9, etc, etc. Great. So what phones are they? How much they cost? We don't know anything else, do we? All we're seeing here in our query is rating. So that query hasn't shown us everything we need to do. So pop back to the design view, and what we want to do is we want to include a couple of other bits of information in, but without filtering anything out. So let's have the phone name, and let's have the price. So now we add those in. We've got them ticked, but we don't have anything else. There's nothing to do with the sorting. They've not got any criteria selected to them. Okay, but they're added into the search results. So we go to run, and now we have, here's all the phones rated in ascending order with their names, with their prices. Okay, so that's how you create a query, and you can do that with multiple things. So you can do that. You can create multiple queries. You can create as many queries as you like for different things. You can add in different things. You could, I mean, if you also wanted, for example, to see all the phones that were rated greater than 6 but cost less than 300, for example, you could include that into that query, run it, and you can see now you've got a shorter list. Okay, that's everything rated higher than 6 but cost less than 300. Okay, so that is part 2. That's the hardest bit. That's the queries. Okay, now at this point I would recommend you go to file and save, because it's going to ask you to save the queries anyway when you move on to the next bit. So when you do, it appears as an object, so you've got your query there. So if you ever want to click on your sheet, you can go back to your sheet, and all you've got to do is double click on your query and it'll load that query back up. And as I say, if you add more information into here, then it will also be included in here the next time you run the query. Okay, so that's part 1 and part 2. The next part's really nice, straightforward, the third part, so that's creating a report. So in order to do that, you need to have your query open. So you don't create a report from your whole database, because it's kind of pointless. The idea of this should be that you would have a database, run a query from it, and then have a report that you could send to somebody else to show what the result of the query was. So in order to do that, make sure your query is open. Go to create and go to report, and that will automatically create you a report. The only other thing you can do here to get a couple more marks is you'll notice this box down here never quite fits it in, so just double click on it like that, it'll expand out to see it. And if you need to, you can change the title up here, over 6, for example, rating. There we go. And that is everything you need to be able to do in Microsoft Access.